Working the night shift can be lonely. It can be boring. But for one teenager, it became something far worse. Something unnatural. This is the story of Ethan, a 17-year-old boy who took a job at Greenfield Grocery to support his struggling family. What started as a simple way to make ends meet quickly turned into a nightmare he could never escape. Ethan was just a kid, but he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. His dad had disappeared 2 years ago, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a family barely scraping by. His mom worked herself to the bone at a diner, and his little sister, Lily, was too young to understand why they couldn't afford the things other families could. So Ethan did what he had to do. He dropped out of school and took the night shift at Greenfield Grocery, a run-down store on the edge of town. The store was off. Even during the day, it had a strange vibe. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects, flickering unpredictably. The aisles were narrow and cluttered, stocked with expired goods and items that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. The air always carried a faint smell of rot, like something had died in the walls. But at night, the store transformed into something else entirely. Ethan's first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. The hum of the refrigerators, the creak of the floorboards, the faint tap, tap, tap of something moving in the shadows. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just the old building settling. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. On the third night, the whispers started. At first, they were so faint Ethan thought he was imagining them. A soft, almost melodic murmuring that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Stay. Stay with us. He froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand as he scanned the empty aisles. The store was deserted. He'd made sure of it before locking the doors. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, drawing him toward the back of the store near the dairy aisle. The air there was icy, so cold it made his breath visible. The whispers stopped the moment he reached the cooler, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. Then came the customers. They started showing up on the fourth night. An old man in a tattered coat, his face gaunt and pale. A woman with hollow eyes and a vacant stare. A child who never spoke, just stood there, watching Ethan with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They never bought anything. They just wandered the aisles, their movements slow and deliberate, their gazes fixed on Ethan. He tried to ignore them, to focus on his work, but their presence was suffocating. He could feel their eyes on him even when his back was turned. And every night there were more of them. By the seventh night, Ethan was at his breaking point. The whispers were constant now, a chorus of voices that echoed in his mind even when he left the store. The customers were everywhere, their hollow eyes following his every move. And then the lights went out. The store plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the pale glow of the moon through the windows. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and the air grew so cold it burned his lungs. Ethan fumbled for his flashlight, but it flickered and died. Panic clawed at his chest as he stumbled toward the exit, only to find the doors locked. The shadows around him seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing like living things. He turned, and there they were, the customers, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You can't leave," the old man said, his voice a guttural rasp. "You're one of us now." Ethan backed away, his heart pounding in his ears. He tripped and fell to the floor, the figures closing in, their hands reaching for him, their whispers merging into a deafening roar. He screamed, but no sound came out. The darkness swallowed him whole. When the lights came back on, the store was empty. Ethan sat on the floor, trembling, his clothes soaked with sweat. The whispers were gone, but the air still felt heavy, oppressive. He stumbled to his feet and ran to the doors, which now swung open easily. He didn't look back as he fled into the night. Ethan quit the next day. He never told his family what happened. How could he? They needed the money, and he couldn't let them down. But the store, it never let him go. The whispers followed him home, faint but persistent. He saw the customers in his dreams, their faces twisted in silent laughter. And sometimes when he looked in the mirror, he thought he saw someone else staring back. "2 years ago, when I was 16, I took a job as a janitor at Chuck E. Cheese's. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, ball pits, pizza, and animatronic animals singing cheesy songs. Not exactly the setting for a horror story, right? But let me tell you, when the lights go out and the last kid leaves, that place transforms. It's like the entire building holds its breath, waiting for something or someone. The night shifts were the worst. I'd be there until 2 a.m., mopping up sticky soda spills, wiping down tables, and trying to ignore the way the animatronic band's glassy eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went. Under the dim emergency lights, their permanent smiles looked more like grimaces, and the stage felt less like a place for entertainment and more like a shrine to something unnatural. At first, it was just little things. I'd hear a faint hum from the animatronics, even though they were supposed to be powered down. Or I'd catch the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty dining area, even though I was the only one there. I told myself it was just the old building settling, or maybe my mind playing tricks on me after hours of being alone. But then things got worse. It was around 2 a.m., and I was cleaning the ball pit. You know that colourful sea of plastic balls that kids love to dive into? Yeah, that thing. The surveillance cameras in the corners of the room blinked their tiny red lights, watching me like silent sentinels. I was almost done when I heard Ita's soft melodic tune coming from the stage. My blood ran cold. The animatronics were supposed to be off. Their plastic faces were frozen in those creepy permanent smiles. But as I turned, I saw him, Chuck E. Cheese himself. His head was tilted slightly, and his glassy eyes were staring right at me. Then his mouth moved. But the voice that came out wasn't the cheerful, pre-recorded one I was used to. It was low, guttural, and dripping with malice. "You shouldn't be here." I dropped my mop and backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. The other animatronics began to twitch, their joints creaking as they turned toward me. The music grew louder, distorted, like a broken record spinning out of control. I bolted for the door, but it was locked. The camera's red lights blinked faster, almost in sync with my racing heartbeat. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. Finally, I managed to unlock the door. I didn't look back as I ran to my car. The next day, I told my manager about what happened. He laughed it off, saying I must have been tired or hearing things. But when I checked the security footage, there was nothing, just me, alone in the room, staring at the stage before running out. No music, no moving animatronics, just silence. It was a little past midnight when I got the order. A high-end apartment downtown. The kind of place where the rich and powerful, live-polished, pristine and utterly soulless. The kind of place where you'd never expect something wrong, but as soon as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me, locked. And that's when I saw it, the trail of blood, glistening under the dim light like a crimson river. The apartment was a masterpiece of modern design-sleek furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, and cold, sterile surfaces. But the air, it was wrong, heavy, suffocating. Like the walls themselves were breathing, inhaling my fear, and the smell metallic, coppery, unmistakably blood clung to the back of my throat. My stomach churned as I followed the trail, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. I passed a glass of wine on the counter. The liquid swirled lazily, as if someone had just set it down. But there's no one there. Just me and the blood. It led me to a bedroom door, where I froze. Symbols runes were carved deep into the wood, their edges jagged and blackened as if burned. Ancient, forbidding. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. What if whatever was behind that door was worse than being trapped? What if it was waiting for me? I decided to look around first. Maybe there was another way out. But the more I explored, the more I realized this wasn't just an apartment. It was a shrine, a temple of horrors. Masks with twisted faces leered at me from the walls, their hollow eyes following my every move. Jars lined the shelves, filled with things I couldn't and didn't want to identify. And then there was the painting. A shadowy figure surrounded by flames, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. No matter where I moved, those eyes stayed locked on me. In the study, I found a desk covered in papers. Newspaper clippings about missing persons, unsolved crimes, arson, and a map of the city with locations marked in red. One of them was the restaurant where I worked. My heart stopped when I found the photo. A man named Victor Hargrave. His face was sharp, his eyes piercing, almost predatory. And his notes, they mentioned the fire that destroyed my restaurant 6 months ago. The fire that killed the owner. Victor had circled the word arson. Next to it, he'd written, "They know too much." My mind raced. Was Victor involved in the fire? Was this some kind of sick game? And then I heard it. A voice, faint, muffled. "Help me! Please!" It was coming from behind a door at the end of the hallway. A woman's voice. Clara. She said she'd been trapped for days. She told me where to find a key hidden in the kitchen. I didn't know if I could trust her, but what choice did I have? Clara was real, and she was terrified. But as I helped her up, I noticed something off. My delivery bag. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside, I found an ornate box. The same runes from the bedroom door were carved into it, pulsing faintly as if alive. And inside the box, a key, but not just any key. Clara said it was the key to the front door and to Victor's secrets. That's when I found the newspapers, old ones. From over 50 years ago, they talked about disappearances in this very building, in this very apartment. The victims, they were sacrifices. Victor's notes confirmed it. "The building is cursed," he wrote. "The sacrifices must continue." And then I heard it. A ticking sound coming from the bedroom. A timer counting down 10 minutes. The apartment was rigged to explode. We ran, Clara and I. The key worked on the front door, but as we burst into the hallway, the explosion hit. The force knocked us to the ground. Smoke and debris filled the air. And then Victor appeared, a knife in his hand. His eyes, they weren't human, not anymore. They glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. He said the sacrifices had to continue, that the curse demanded it. I didn't think. I grabbed a fire extinguisher and swung. It was enough to buy us time. We ran, and we didn't stop until we were outside, gasping for air. We made it out, but as I stood there, clutching the delivery bag, I realized the ornate box was still inside. The key, Victor's secrets. I don't know what they mean. I don't know if the curse is real. But I do know this. That night changed me. And I'll never look at my job or the city the same way again.